Kia ora, whakalofalahi atu, hala o geto, kamna Māori, mā loa lelei, pule vinaka, talofa lava, aloha, warm Pacific greetings. Welcome to the Pacific Research Learning Modules developed by our AUT Moanaro Pacific Research Network under the guidance of the Moanaro Governance Group. Moanaro is dedicated to realising Pacific research aspirations that centre Indigenous Pacific knowledge systems, research methodologies and practices grounded within Aotearoa and across the wider Moana region. Through collaboration in research development initiatives, research outcomes, professional development, public research events, workshops and advocacy, Moanaro contributes to the dynamic and crucial field of Pacific research, shaping an enduring legacy of AUT Pacific research for generations to come. On the 11th of September 2025, Moanaro launched AUT's first Pacific Research Guidelines at the Pacific Research Symposium. This learning module will provide an overview of these research guidelines and associated activities to support academics to engage with these guidelines. We thank you for joining us and we look forward to going on this Pacific research learning journey alongside you. Mahalo. I just want to open up this learning module with a Tukalau proverb. Toto hau tokinga nei, awa nā tupulanga e whai mai. Plant a seed today for future generations. I hope that through your engagement in this learning module, a seed is planted and that will continue to strengthen and shape your engagement in Pacific research. Like a canoe proven on the open sea, the integrity of our work is tested in real-world conditions, requiring skill, collective strength, shared purpose, and the ability to navigate challenges together. This first module will introduce you to the Pacific Research Guidelines so that you can recognise their purpose and significance and begin to apply the practices of positionality and reflexivity through reflection on personal connection to people and place. Throughout the learning modules, we will provide activities and resources to help you deepen your understanding and practice. You will find the associated resources on the Canvas page and be prompted to pause the video at specific times to engage with the resources. For this module, you'll need to access the Pacific Research Guidelines and have a reflective journal or a Word document on hand. A key component of these learning modules is positionality and reflexivity. We will continue to prompt you to reflect on how these topics relate to you and how you can apply the learning to your research, to your teaching and learning and supervision practices. Everyone will be at a different level of knowledge and understanding. As the visual of the coconut tree demonstrates, some of us will be at the beginning of our journey, a seed requiring nurturing, while others will be a mature tree bearing fruit for others. Wherever you are, these learning modules are an opportunity for growth, allowing for a collective coconut grove to grow and nourish our AUT community. To start, let's begin with a self-reflection. This will be useful for you to return to throughout the learning modules to track your progress. We'll review the self-assessment questions and then ask you to pause the video to reflect and write down your answers. Rate your current knowledge of the Pacific and Pacific history on a scale of 1 to 10. 1, I am a seed, a novice learner. 10, I am a mature fruiting tree, a source of knowledge. Identify your current engagement with or connection to Pacific communities and peoples in your research, teaching and learning and supervision. What relationships do you currently hold that can support you on this learning journey? Where might you build relationships to support you? Reflect on what narratives you currently hold and promote of the Pacific and its people. Where do these narratives show up in your research, teaching and learning and supervision? What are your motivations for participating in these learning modules? And what do you hope to gain? Please pause the video and take as much time as you need to respond to these reflective questions. Launched in September 2025, the AUT Pacific Research Guidelines are a navigational tool to guide researchers in moving ethically and respectfully with Pacific communities here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and where appropriate across the region and internationally. They are designed to uphold and advance Pacific research excellence at AUT and beyond by providing a culturally grounded framework for engaging in research for, with, and by Pacific peoples in ways that honour Pacific worldviews, values, and knowledge systems, while meeting the highest standards of ethical practice. Rooted in Pacific values, relational ethics, and Indigenous knowledge systems, these guidelines have been shaped by Pacific peoples and for Pacific peoples with the supporting voices of our non-Pacific collaborators. They invite researchers to reflect deeply on how research is carried out, to ensure it strengthens the the relational space, and upholds the collective mana and contributes meaningfully to the well-being and aspirations of Pacific communities. These guidelines aim to ensure that research is culturally appropriate, that it is effective and ultimately beneficial to Pacific peoples, moving beyond historical approaches that often reflect perspectives of outsiders. These guidelines echo and build on the foundations laid by others who have called for research that maximizes benefits and minimizes harm to Pacific individuals and communities, generates knowledge and understanding about and for Pacific peoples and their environments, is conducted in culturally appropriate ways, contributes to the attainment of the highest level of health and well-being, supports education that is for and by Pacific peoples, empowers Pacific peoples as research participants and co-owners of knowledge, and strengthens Pacific research capacity and capability. These guidelines are intended for all academics engaging in Pacific research, teaching and learning and postgraduate supervision. While centred at AUT, these guidelines have national reach across Aotearoa, regional relevance across Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, and global significance wherever Pacific research is undertaken. They do provide guidance for the full lifespan of research, from positionality, research design, community engagement, data collection, analysis and dissemination, to the long-term impact of research. We hope that these guidelines will also have wider application to areas where Pacific people are involved in inquiry, knowledge generation and solutions for communities and Pacific environments. This includes fellow Indigenous researchers and scholars, non-Pacific researchers engaging in Pacific research, university leadership and institutional decision makers, research ethics committees and funding bodies, Pacific research centres, knowledge hubs, policy and government agencies and academic institutions in the Pacific region. The guidelines can also inform those supervising Pacific postgraduates or postgraduates engaging in Pacific research and offer insight into opportunities to incorporate Pacific Indigenous knowledge and research into teaching and learning practices. The AUT Pacific Research Guidelines are a living resource designed to guide and strengthen Pacific research at Te Wānanga Aronui o Tamaki Makaurau. These guidelines sit within and are shaped by AUT's strategic commitments. They align with Te Kete, AUT's institutional strategy, and seek to uphold Te Aronui, AUT's Te Tiriti o Waitangi framework, which calls us to walk in respectful relationship as tangata moana alongside tangata whenua. They are also grounded in Rautaki Rangahau, the AUT research strategy, which invites us to whakamana, encourage, enable and sustain research excellence that is bold and impactful. As New Zealand's only University of Technology, AUT holds a distinctive position. Here, Pacific research sits at the nexus of innovation, applied knowledge, and Indigenous ways of knowing and being, shaping solutions and innovations that are purposeful and are of benefit to Pacific communities. The postgraduate research guidelines were constructed using the concept of tapasa as a guiding framework. Ruben and Whaavai explained that the word tapasa in Ngangana Samoa, Samoan language, is related to the word kapasa in Lea Whakatonga Tongan language and compass in English. The context is linked to the practice of navigation and wayfinding, since the tapasa serves as a guide or a pathway for Pacific ancestral voyaging. Moana Nui a Kiwa, our Pacific Ocean, and the whenua land, have been and continue to be an important part of Pacific people's cultural identities, affiliations, and sense of legitimacy. The Ministry of Education explains that traditionally the tapasa extends beyond the finite and physical limitations of a compass, where the tapasa serves as a guide or pathway in malanga or a journey. In earlier times, the Tapasa guided our ancestors as they successfully voyaged across oceans by reading the stars, the constellations, marking the winds and mapping the currents. As such, the guidelines are an invitation to chart a course, a journey into Pacific research, where we critically reflect on researcher positionality and research approaches. We strive to uphold the integrity of Indigenous Pacific knowledge and methodologies. We engage in ethical, reciprocal, and culturally grounded research that meaningfully benefits Pacific communities. If research involving Pacific communities neither benefits nor meaningfully reflects those communities, it risks losing its purpose and relevance. Research needs to be shaped in ways that honour, include, and uphold the aspirations of the communities it engages. The guidelines are structured to serve as a compass guiding academics from foundational principles to practical application. These guidelines were developed using the process of talanoa. At the 2025 Pacific Research Symposium, Dr. Timote Violetti, one of the pioneers of the talanoa methodology, reminded us that talanoa is more than a method. It is a methodology. It is the ology of the method which guides the values. Tala, to tell and relate, and noa is a space of potentiality without restriction. Talanoa is embedded in Pacific relational and communicative norms of oratory and verbal negotiation, most generally associated with Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa. Violetti expresses that talanoa is about personal encounter where people story their issues, their realities, their aspirations. Halapua shares that it is a philosophy involving an open dialogue where people can speak from their hearts and where there are no preconceptions. This body of work was shaped through the gathering and weaving of voices in Aotearoa and in the Pacific region, brought together through talanoa over a 6-month period in 2025. 50 participants contributed to the process, including postgraduate students at AUT University, members of the Wānaroa Pacific Research Network and Pacific research communities in Aotearoa and the Pacific. In developing the guidelines, talanoa provided a culturally grounded space for people to speak, to listen, reflect, and connect. It was not simply a method of engagement, but a way of being together, of affirming relationships, values, and responsibilities. Participants shared their lived experiences as researchers, as educators, students, and community members, offering insights into the reality of doing research that serves specific peoples and upholds specific ways of knowing and being. Participants who wanted to share more insights beyond the talanoa or who were unable to attend talanoa sessions also had the opportunity of providing written submissions and giving consent for their quotes to be shared as either named or unnamed contributors. In the words of one of our governance group members, Sione Tikitiki, he says, "When I think Pacific, I think diversity, I think strength and diversity, and I think hospitality, warmth. That's the sense we want in our research," close quote. Through the development of Pacific Research Guidelines, Wānaroa seeks to honour and give life to the depth and breadth of Indigenous Pacific research, grounded in the wisdom of esteemed Pacific knowledge bearers and the richness of Pacific knowledge systems, thereby advancing the decolonisation and re-indigenisation of research practices. Historically, university research practices have often reflected colonial influences, which has contributed to a sense of caution and concern among Pacific peoples about the intentions and outcomes of externally driven extractive research. Now, these guidelines, their developing processes and application aim to ensure that research involving Pacific peoples is conducted in a manner that is safe, it is collaborative, strengths-based, and supports Indigenous communities to self-determination within local and regional lived contexts. While it is necessary within Pacific contexts to acknowledge the harm that colonialism has inflicted on Pacific peoples and their knowledge systems, these guidelines affirm the validity of Pacific Indigenous knowledge within academia without requiring justification through the Western research canon. Moreover, Pacific Indigenous knowledge offers vital insights that can address gaps and limitations within Western paradigms, fostering more inclusive and holistic understandings. This is the inherent va, the relational, environmental, temporal space and realities in which Pacific communities live. This is a living document that will evolve over time as the scholarship of Pacific peoples and environments continue to be generated, developed, and protected with great duty and responsibility to those who take this journey. It is important that these guidelines are applied as a living framework that informs each stage of the research journey. They are intended to be interpreted, adapted, reflexive, and enriched by those who use them. They support researchers to act with cultural integrity and to work in partnership with Pacific communities, ensuring that research is a shared endeavour that contributes to collective well-being. The guidelines are structured to guide researchers from foundational principles to practical application. They begin by clarifying their purpose, the scope, and intended audience, and offer practical advice on how to use the document effectively. They also make explicit what the guidelines do not cover, ensuring clarity of intent. They provide a framework for thinking, planning, and conducting research in ways that are culturally aligned and relationally accountable. It is important that they are adapted to the specific context, community, environments, and research question. They need to be used in conjunction with institutional ethics requirements, field-specific guidelines, for example, medical, educational, environmental research, and community-specific protocols. They are not only for the start of a project. Use them to guide decisions from the early design stage through data collection and analysis to dissemination and post-project relationships. These guidelines acknowledge and celebrate that Pacific research is indeed diverse, traversing communities, disciplines, knowledge, systems, and industry sectors. For this purpose, these research guidelines focus on Pacific methodologies, research engagement processes, data sovereignty, and ethical practice as key domains that support Pacific research endeavours. Another key feature of the guidelines is the emphasis on positionality, both as a philosophical stance and as an active research practice. Researchers are encouraged to critically reflect on their identity, their relationships and place within the Pacific research space, supported by a positionality guide that offers practical prompts and considerations. What these guidelines do not do is they do not replace formal ethics approval required by universities, health boards, and funders. They do not provide step-by-step instructions for every research scenario, and they do not override local community protocols, as it is important that these always take precedence where they apply. Now that you have an overview of the Pacific Research Guidelines, we ask you to take a moment to reflect. Please grab your learning journal and respond to the following prompts. Create a short summary of this introduction that you can share with others, other academics, researchers, postgraduates, detailing what the Pacific Research Guidelines are, who they are for, and why they're important. Write this in a language that makes sense to you so that you're easily able to express to others what the Pacific Research Guidelines are, why they're important, and how they apply to our work. Based on this introduction to the Pacific Research Guidelines, where do you see this guideline being most applicable to you in your research, your teaching and learning, your supervision? Feel free to use specific examples that come to mind. These guidelines are a mean to inform praxis, where theory, lessons, and ideas are enacted, embodied, realised, applied, and put into practice. We ask that you continually seek opportunities to take these lessons and put them into action where it makes sense for you. Building on the last prompt, identify 1 to 3 next steps you'll take to begin applying the Pacific Research Guidelines into your practice. For example, it could be sharing them with a postgraduate student or initiating a conversation with a colleague. You can pause the video and now take time to complete your reflection. We hope you found this module as a useful introduction to the Pacific Research Guidelines. Our next topic will be an introduction to the Pacific Research Movement, exploring its past, present, and future. The module will support you to gain familiarity with the Pacific context in Aotearoa, understand the historical and cultural foundations of Pacific research, explore future directions and opportunities, and apply knowledge to real-world contexts. We'd like to warmly acknowledge the contributors to this module. Dr. Jessica Wirtschel, our Learning Module Designer. We also acknowledge the AUT Moanero Governance Group, the Wainaro Pacific Research Guidelines Working Group, led by Dr. Daisha Tonimopea and our ROs Claralyn and Waverley for their valuable contributions. Our thanks also to the creative designers, Cece and Kayani, who are both AUT alumni, for helping bring this module to life. You can reach out to me if you need any further support, and you can also access Pacific Research resources through the Wainaro website. Thank you so much for your engagement in these learning modules, and I wish you all the best with your journey through Pacific research.